Truckers and long-distance drivers of Reddit, what are some of your spookiest, unexplained stories of the road? Please do like, share, and subscribe. Not spooky. Unexplained? Definitely. I work as a trucker for a year or so, and had some weird experiences. I'm probably late to this thread, but fuck it. One of the strangest things I saw was just off the Trans-Canada in BC. It was surprisingly dead on the road I was on, nobody going either direction, which was weird, even for a Wednesday in the wee hours of the morning. I found a corner and see a pillar of smoke. My initial thought is, that explains the no traffic. I start to slow down, since it's kind of a blind corner, and see that there is only one car off the ditch, fire blazing. I pull off the road to see if anyone is injured and can't see anyone. On the other side of the clearing is, no joke, 4 or 5 black bears standing on their back legs. As I notice them, they all begin roaring just crazily, like I intruded some sort of party or something. I back away, back into my truck, and watch as they calm down and continue to watch the fire. What the fuck happened that morning, I'll never know. Bears are weird. I have a lot of weird bear stories. I was the passenger for this, but on a long drive I accompanied my mom on, we saw a man standing on the concrete divider at about 10 p.m. It was fall, so it was dark out and pouring rain. He was dressed as a jester, and it was on a stretch of poorly lit highway. She flinched and asked if I saw it. I said that I did, and we watched as he walked slowly along the divider with his arms out a little to the sides. She pulled over because she was freaking out so bad, and he started doing weird stuff, cartwheels and handstands and shit. Weirdest thing ever. Just a couple of months ago, I worked a pretty late shift one night, left the office around 2 a.m. and have a 30-minute drive home. I live pretty far out in the woodland areas of the country, forest directly on both sides of the road. I was casually driving along through the fog, and out of nowhere a kid's rubber ball, the basketball-sized ones with cartoons on them, comes bouncing out in the middle of the road from the trees. I slammed on my brakes and swerved to miss because I thought for sure a kid was bound to be chasing behind it. Never seen a soul step out. As I drive on by and started thinking, what would a kid be doing out playing this late? Then I remembered. There were no houses around where this happened at. Someone had to have thrown it on the road. The height it came onto the road at and the way it bounced, the wind simply didn't blow it in front of me. It was pretty creepy. One Sunday afternoon, I was jogging along a quiet country road, and it was starting to snow. A Ford Bronco pulling a horse trailer slows down next to me, and the driver asks, "Are you cold?" I say no, because even though I'm cold, you should never show weakness to a stranger. He smiles and craned his head to look at his horse trailer, then yells, "See? Quit complaining." In the horse trailer was the rest of his family, wife and 4 kids, all dressed nicely like they had just come from church. Upon being chided to quit complaining, 3 of them stick their tongues out at him, and one starts crying. The seats in the car were all empty, and to this day, I wonder what the backstory was behind the horse trailer incident. Last winter, I worked as a night route driver for a medical courier service. Basically, I'd drive way out to rural clinics, pick up biological samples from the drop box, and then drive them back into town and ship them to a lab via the 24-hour Kinkos. My route was the same 4 nights a week, but on Thursday, the 5th night of my work week, I had one additional stop, a vet's office out in the middle of fucking nowhere. It added about an hour onto my run because of how far out it was. I seriously don't know how they stayed in business because I only passed like 2 houses on the way there. Anyway, it's around 1 a.m. and I'm heading out to my last stop, the vet's office in BFE. I get there, park, leave my car running as always, go around to the side of the building, collect the sample, head back to the car, and freeze as I see something rifling through the front seats through the open driver's side window. I think I'm being robbed in the middle of nowhere. My phone is in the cup holder, and I'm about to shit my pants when this thing stops, looks over at me, and then hauls ass back into the woods at the side of the driveway. It had to have been a bear, but it ran on 2 feet. I know bears can walk bipedally, so I'm sure that's what it was, but some little part of me thinks I saw something else. After that, I always drove my car right up to the drop box, so I didn't even have to get out when I made that pickup. Fuck that. Not my personal experience, but my uncle lives out deep in rural Oregon. He told me this story where he was driving to work really early in the morning to a small town about 30 minutes away. There was a bit of traffic just outside of town, so he stopped behind another car. There was super heavy fog this morning, like Silent Hill quality, really thick, so he could just see the back lights of the car in front of him. After following the car very slowly for a while, the car stops once more in the traffic. My uncle sits there and waits for about 20 minutes. The car still hasn't moved. All he can see is the headlights in front of him. Eventually, he gets out to see what's the matter. When my uncle gets out and walks to the car in front of him, he sees the entire front of the car completely totaled. Inside was the dead driver. The back part of the car was completely fine, and my uncle did not even know a thing was wrong earlier due to the fog. The story always unsettled me when I had to drive in fog. I was a front seat passenger on a drive from Guatemala City to the west coast of the country. In the very small town, there was a big rig pulling 2 trailers. All of a sudden, the truck stops. The next thing I see is the driver walking to the middle of the 2 trailers and dragging a woman he apparently hit to the side of the road and getting back in and driving off. Only he didn't rush like he committed a crime. He walked as if it was just another day. I was once driving back from northern Western Australia, and at about 11 o'clock at night, and I noticed this red light off in the distance hanging just above the horizon in my side mirror. I checked it again and again for about 2 hours, and it just hung there, following us. No matter how many turns or hills we went over, I decided to stop at a rest stop for a stretch and something to eat. I walked to the road and looked back to see the light was still there, just hanging a little off the top of the road. I pointed it out to my dad, who had woken up, and he couldn't make tops or tails of it. I never did find out what it was, nor have I seen it again. I was driving cross-country on my way home to Maine. I'd had enough interstate driving and decided to take back roads the rest of the way home when I got to New Hampshire. So, I'm way out in the boondocks past the White Mountains when I see the most effed up and hilarious thing of my whole life. Up ahead was a small human on a shitty old tricycle weaving back and forth on the road. I slowed down as to not hit them, and as I went by at a crawl, I had to rubberneck several times. It was what appeared to be a midget, had a beard, was dressed like an elf in a medieval-type clothes and a pointy hat. He was wearing dark glasses and was tapping along the road with a long wooden stick. So yeah, it was apparently a blind gnome on a tricycle. I'd been driving all day, but didn't feel tired at all. I think it was just some midget with an awesome sense of humor out fucking with people. Or maybe he was crazy. I don't know. I was once driving late night from San Antonio to Houston down I-10, probably about midnight. Along this road, there is an access road that runs mostly parallel to the interstate and veers off at an overpass every now and then. When the road veers off, the overpass, which is usually tall enough to let the tractor trailers through, has a pretty steep incline of dirt and concrete forming the hill. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I'm driving down the road, sort of caravanning with my friend, except he was about 10 miles back because he stopped at Buc-ee's to get gas, so he was far behind me. I noticed there's a car driving at the same speed as me on the access road, veering off at every overpass until I can't see him anymore, and then speeding back up and driving alongside me again and again. At first, I'm sort of worried because I think it's a cop. I had a gram with me but hadn't gotten a chance to smoke yet. At one point, the car once again veers off and then back parallel with me until he just takes off, going well over 100 miles per hour. I'm sure because I was already going around 75 to 80 miles per hour. An overpass was coming, and I expected him to veer off again, except he didn't. He just drove straight on and ramped off the overpass, catching what looked like 15 to 20 feet of air, not to mention the height of the overpass already. I was still behind him, so I lost sight of him on the other side because I hadn't passed under the overpass yet. But when I did pass under, I didn't see anything. Nothing at all. No wreckage, no fire, no trees, bushes, ditches, nothing. It was like it hadn't happened. I pulled off and turned around and looked around the area, and I couldn't find any evidence. Weirdest thing I ever saw. But the weirder part is my friend told me he saw the same car doing the same thing when he got to that stretch of road, only he never saw the car commit suicide like I did. I had just merged into I-25 from US 36 in Denver, and even though the speed limit is 55 miles per hour, nobody drives that slow. Because of the amount of traffic that merges on at the next on-ramp, I usually moved over one more lane. I did this as usual, and a silver Pontiac Aztek had let me into the lane. I gave them a thank you wave, and just then, the pickup in front of me hits his brakes hard, and so do I. The truck then swerved to the right just in time for me to see the cars in front of him stop. I swerved to the left while still braking without looking. I missed the car in that lane, thankfully, but I took in my mirror and saw the Pontiac Aztec had clipped one of the cars that was stopped. When it did, it spun and then went into the side of the same car. I called 911 and let them know of the accident, then got off the highway at 58th Avenue and came back around as a witness, fired the police. When I got back to the site, traffic was stopped and someone had already got out to check on people. I didn't see it right away because of where I parked, but when I got out of my truck, there was a guy standing at the driver's side of the Aztec crying, and he had put his jacket over the driver's head. The person was killed from head trauma when their head hit the window. If only I had not been selfish about the traffic merging ahead, this person would have had more stopping room and more distance to react. By the way, not a truck driver, but you do drive around Denver and surrounding areas all day for work. Back in the early mid-70s, my mother and I lived in the Pacific Northwest. I was about 6 years old. We were on an offbeat road right out of Seattle, very dark night, no moon and a wisp of fog. We saw a Volkswagen Beetle on the side of the road with their emergency flashers on and a rather good-looking guy, as my mom describes him, with his arm in a sling waving us down. My mom pulled over, being the kind woman that would help anybody in need, and he looked normal. Mom rolled down her window and asked if she could help, and the guy asked my mom if she could help him get the last lug nut off his tire so he could change his flat. So, my mother introduces herself and he says, "Hello, my name is Ted," and then smiled, then looked at me, reached over and shook my hand and asked my name, and I think I got the bad vibe as well because I said nothing to him. My mom said something about his smile really made her uncomfortable, and then she noticed that he was missing the passenger seat in his Beetle. So, she rolls the window back up and said she would call a tow truck to come help him at the next city, then speeds away while looking in her rearview mirror. She sees him taking off the sling and getting back in the Beetle and took off very fast in the opposite direction. So that's the night a 6-year-old and I shook the hand of Ted Bundy. None of these are trucking stories, but they do involve long commutes on country roads. My sis worked about an hour and a half away from my mom's, where she was temporarily staying at this time, which was bad because she had a bad habit of falling asleep in cars. So on nights that she worked really late, I made her promise to call me and I'd stay up and talk to her until she got home. One night, late, I'm on the phone with her and out of nowhere she starts screaming. She finally gets out some semblance of a sentence, telling me there was a girl covered in blood crawling out of the ditch onto the road. She pulls the car back around and jumps out of the car and runs to her, the phone falling out on the ground. I am still listening. I hear the girl start sobbing and telling her, "Oh God, not you, not you. I need help. They're coming back. They're coming back for me." My sister at this point thinks the girl might have mental issues because of how frantic and disconnected her thoughts are, and because while she keeps saying she needs help, she doesn't seem to think my sister could help her. In hindsight, I think the girl saw my 5'9", 100-pound sister with her high-pitched voice and thought that they could easily kill her too. From here, besides screaming and broken glass, I can only tell it from her side. She sees this truck pulling up and is about to wave them down when the girl goes crazy and starts clawing and pleading with my sis to run. The truck puts on its brights and 2 very big men jump out of the car and start walking towards them, making clicking, cat-calling sounds, and my sister's blood turns to ice. She reaches over, grabs the girl, no way in hell she's leaving her, and in a whirlwind manages to force her into the car and jump in herself before the men reach the car and start smashing her lights. She speeds off, clipping one of them, and is followed by this truck trying to run her off the road for about a half an hour. They only pull away when she reaches a hospital. Inside, the girl was in a panic and wouldn't let my sister leave her with the doctors. She kept saying she was her best friend and repeating her name over and over. From the doctors, my sister learned that this girl was repeatedly raped and then tied up and drugged behind the truck. To add to the creepiness, once my sister got home, she looked at her name tag and remembered that she had left hers at home and had borrowed an ex-employee's tag, Stephanie. And yet, despite my sis saying she didn't recall ever not fearing for her life enough to get to formalities and exchange names, the girl had called her by her real name. I was asleep in the passenger seat on a 9-hour trip home to a small town in northern Ontario. I woke up to my boyfriend yelling at me to wake up. I shot upright and see a homeless man dressed in rags, kinda ghostly looking, running down the middle of the road ahead of us. I was so confused and scared. We're in the middle of nowhere. There's no homeless people who live up here, and it's like 1 a.m., and it just didn't make sense. Then my eyes focused, and I realized I was staring at the ass end of a moose. Not something you want to see on the road at night, but much less scary than homeless crazy ghost guy. Mid-90s, I went on a road trip with my son. For some stupid reason, decided to take a different route home than the one I had taken previously and was familiar with. Turned out the new route was a super desolate road. I specifically chose to drive in the middle of the night so my son would be sleeping and there'd be less traffic. It's probably 3 a.m. and of course, my POS car breaks down. By some luck of the draw, I'm almost right in front of an abandoned roadside market and was able to coast into the parking lot. The windows are all boarded up on the market, steam is pouring out from under my hood, and it was essentially the start to every single dumb chick breaks down in the middle of nowhere and gets hacked to death movie you've ever seen. All of a sudden, I see headlights coming around the bend. I'd been driving on this road for a couple of hours and had seen maybe 2 other vehicles the whole time. A truck drives past, slows down. Then I see the reverse lights come on my rearview mirror. Deliverance banjo music starts to play in my head. The truck pulls up, so our vehicles are driver window to driver window, and I see the driver is an older man, and he's just staring at me. He looks like the stereotypical serial killer you visualize. Long, scraggly gray hair, grizzled stubble, sort of crazy eyes. He motions for me to roll down my window. I'm just trying to look anywhere but directly at him and acting like I don't see him, and everything's fine and dandy. Oh no, I'm not in any distress. Please ignore the steam coming from my car. I'm good. Thanks anyway. He backs up a little, parks, and gets out of his truck and starts walking towards my car. I'm thinking, this is where my son and I end up a news story about bodies being found in the boonies when the snow melts, and he starts yelling, "I'm not going to hurt you. Roll down your window." I keep looking anywhere but at him while trying to give off strong, "you don't want to fuck with me" vibes. In reality, I'm about shitting my pants. He gives me a disgusted look, walks to his truck, and starts digging around. He comes walking back with his tools in his hand, and now I'm thinking, oh my god, he's got tools. He's going to kill me and bust out my teeth and cut my fingers off so I can't be identified. He yells, "Open the hood." I'm looking everywhere but at him. "Open the hood. Let me see what's wrong." He's pissed. I'm scared shitless, but I reach down and pop the hood. He opens it, and I crouch down so I can see him through the couple of inches where the hood is open. He looks up, and we make eye contact, and I about die. He looks down and keeps doing whatever he's doing. He goes back and forth between his truck and my car a couple more times, bringing more tools, some jug of something and other things I can't make out. After about 15 minutes, he closes my hood and yells at me to start it up. My car sputters a little, turns over, and then seems fine. He yells, "Be careful, there's a lot of weirdos out here." Gets in his truck, gives me one last disgusted look, and drives off. My car made it home. My dad looked it over after I told him the story and deducted the guy had changed a radiator hose. My dad pointed out many times that the chances of me being struck by lightning were probably better than my chances of some random guy in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, happened to be driving around with a radiator hose and the tools to replace it for whatever 10-plus-year-old POS foreign car I'd been driving was. DR broke down on a dark, scary road, and instead of killing me, the serial killer-looking stranger who pulled over seemingly out of nowhere at 3 a.m. fixed my car. My uncle was a long-haul trucker back in the 90s, mainly did international runs from Canada down into the US and back to Canada, with a pretty nice new Kenworth that had one of those maximum-size sleepers on it. It had a built-in toilet in the works. He decided that the small tank that came with the toilet was a pain in the ass to have to empty so frequently, so he converted half of his passenger-side diesel tank into a septic tank. A few weeks after converting his tank, he happened to pull in at a truck stop somewhere in the States and parked for the night after driving longer than he should have. When he woke up at 5 a.m., with the dawn just starting to get bright, he climbed out to see beside his truck something that makes him laugh every time he tells the story. On the ground, on the right side of his truck, was a 5-gallon jerry can, a siphon hose with one end at his tank and the other laying on the ground, puddle of puke, and some puke footprints. Another few feet away, puddle of puke, another few feet away, another puddle of puke. Some dumb SOB tried to siphon his septic tank in the middle of the night.